Welcome everyone to Read the Book First. Amanda joins us.
Hi.
Today we're going to break down Dracula by Bram Stoker. And I might have to retract what Marissa and I said in an earlier episode of Read the Book First. She texted me and was like, hey, is what we said true? And I was like, yes and no.
Yeah. Because what you said was something along the lines of like, it's boring, right? Or something. And like, look, I'm not pretending. There are parts of Dracula that are boring.
Uh-huh.
I think it's silly to say otherwise.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah.
The characters are really good. And nobody gives them credit because everyone does. We'll talk about it in a second, I guess.
I read this. Okay, I supposedly read this when I was taking Gothic literature for my undergrad degree. Do I remember most of what happens? Absolutely not. And that makes me want to think that I only read the parts that we were discussing for that day of that class, and I didn't read the whole book, which makes sense because or we were only assigned part of it, and I don't remember. But either way, rereading this, I enjoyed it way more than I expected to. But then again, there's lots of boring parts because it's a big-ass novel.
Mm-hmm. In the interest of full disclosure to y'all, I maybe just read this in the last 48 hours. But in all fairness, I've read it like definitely at least twice before.
Yeah. So a reread is fine. A skim reread is fine.
And we'll get there.
Yeah. Before we kind of dive in, just some background knowledge. I'm going to get English majory here. I have a degree. Might as well use it. Right? Dracula is a Gothic novel. It's like for folks that don't know what a Gothic novel is. Here are the main elements. And I did take a Gothic literature class, so this is what I remembered. And Google search said, yes, your memory is correct, Nessa. And I was like, cool. The biggest one is a castle or mansion setting is usually, not always, but often a part of a Gothic novel. And the setting is like a full character, and not just in the way that people like joke that New York City is always a character in stories and books, but like it actually is. There's something mystical, frightening, fear, ghosts, unusual quote monsters in these castles that take a big part of Gothic literature. Gothic novels always have mystery and suspense that push the plot forward. I mean, lots of genres do, but that's like specifically needed in a Gothic novel.
And they're always like trying to solve like the mystery of what's going on in this creepy old house.
Yes. There's lots of omens and visions or prophecy, often used as foreshadowing, but also to help the plot go forward.
Like the 2 ounces of research that I did as I was looking it up on TV tropes talked about how it's kind of also an extension of romanticism in a lot of ways. But it's also kind of interesting because Dracula subverts a lot of those romanticism tropes. Was that what you were about to just talk about?
No, I was going to say that later, but you're correct. Yes. And that's part of why I read it for Gothic literature. Also, supernatural events are needed for most Gothic novels, whether that be ghosts or objects walking. There's often usually women in distress is like a big thing of it, which this novel plays with for reasons. Extreme emotions and loss of control are like common themes as well. So that's like a background knowledge for what a Gothic novel is. Frankenstein is a Gothic novel. Northanger Abbey is Jane Austen like poking fun at Gothic novels. The Castle of... My brain is blanking now. I read it and I really liked it.
Oh,
the Castle of not Othello, Otranto. I always said Toronto.
Well, there's also the Edgar Allan Poe like short story, The Fall of the House of Usher. That's Gothic, right?
That's Southern Gothic.
Southern Gothic.
Poe is American Southern Gothic, which is different.
But he's from Maryland.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And he lived in Virginia. Virginians will tell you that.
It's true.
Gothic novels were really big 50 years prior to when this book was written. It's like was the first big boom of Gothic literature. And so it makes sense that Bram grew up reading those books and was inspired by that a lot. But as far as vampires, for me, before like actually reading Dracula, I didn't know much about vampires besides like pop culture, as in like in the last 20 years of vampires, right? Twilight, which we will be reading for this podcast later. Like the Count from Sesame Street, like Count Chocula, like those are the kind of like vampirisms that I was like aware of before I took my Gothic literature class, because then I also had to read some other vampire books.
Dracula in particular like popularized them, especially for the Western audience, Western being like actual Western Europe. Vampires have always been a big thing in lore in Eastern Europe and stuff, and there's a lot of like little stuff that comes out that's not necessarily in this book. Like the whole count comes from, if you drop a whole bunch of rice or something in front of a vampire, they have to sit there and count it.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
Yeah, it's true. But that's
true. So that means I should always carry rice in case of vampire.
There are different parts of that vampiric lore that come in through Dracula.
The book I read, it's The Essential Dracula, and it's an annotated version of Dracula, which was fun to read, but I kept having to like stop reading all of the footnotes because there was like 20 per 2 pages of just extra information, which was fascinating, but also like, Janessa, this is taking literally twice as long for you to read this book, so stop. But even like, yes, he took some of this vampire stuff from, the cultures, Eastern European cultures, but there was like dozens of vampire poems, plays, and books popular in England before.
Yeah, Camilla came out before this.
Came out, and supposedly, scholars say that Dracula is Bram Stoker's response to Camilla, because Camilla is a short vampire story about a lesbian vampire.
Yeah,
and scholars think that this is his response to that, which is interesting for other reasons that we can get into later once we like actually talk about the book. But it's obvious that he was inspired by Camilla and also by the vampire by John. I'm going to say this last name wrong. Pidori.
Yeah, when I say that it like codified the tropes, I really just mean when you think about vampires, like the not being able to see your reflection, the not being able to like go out in the sun, the turning into a bat. A lot of this comes from the Dracula movies.
Yes, but from this, no, absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
Fun fact: the guy who wrote The Vampire, it was actually Lord Byron's physician.
Huh.
Wild, huh? The connections.
Lord Byron just is in the middle of so many things.
So much.
All the time.
And it was because he wrote, the physician wrote the vampire short story with the whole famous short story competition that inspired what would become Frankenstein.
Oh.
So like same camp out, hang out.
That's so wild.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting.
This is a found footage book.
This is a found footage book. It is. Yeah, or it's an epistolary novel.
Yeah, I know that's what it's actually called. But here's the thing. An epistolary novel, like I know that that's what it actually is called. But the way that it's structured, because spoilers slightly, it's revealed that Mina's the one that kind of compiles all this information. They pull out like reports, telegrams, newspaper articles. And typically, like when I think of epistolary, I'm thinking of like correspondence.
Yeah no, that was like rereading it / reading the full thing for the first time. Who knows really what the truth is. I was reading a lot of books back then at one time.
I'm still pretty sure you spark noted it.
Okay. Probably. And honestly, I prefer Schmoop over Spark Notes a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, but that's because that's better. Schmoop is better.
Schmoop is better.
So much better.
Except
like
for the ads are worse on the website.
The ads are worse. Notes has fun quizzes, but Schmoop is not always free because they lock some stuff behind paywalls.
Yeah. How dare they? I
know. Need money to run your website?
Yeah, when I was reading this for the podcast, I did not realize how much of the found footage it actually was. Like, yes, I knew it was journal entries and letters, but having the parts, the phonograph, verbal journal, I guess.
Yeah.
And the newspaper articles, I thought that was
There's a part where Seward, like the guy who does the phonograph the most, he talks about how like Van Helsing is like, oh, I need you to like keep a journal even though you don't have your phonograph machine. And he was like, I find this writing by hand so tiresome. And I was like, bro, I feel that deeply.
You know, when I read that part, I was like, this is Amanda coded.
For like an ounce of context, I've sent countless voice messages. Yeah.
Anyways, now that we've done our due diligence and like, you know, setting some like background info, let's get into it. And like, I have so many notes because when I was reading this, I had to like write a summary of each chapter. Otherwise, I would have been so bored. Also, shout out to the audiobook I got from Libby. The actors did amazing, and they had accents and different voice actors for different characters, which really helped me actually keep reading. The book starts with a journal entry from Jonathan Harker. He is on his way to visit a castle and a client of his boss. His boss is a British lawyer. What do they call them?
Solicitors.
The Brits.
They're literally like, he's literally like a real estate.
He's a real estate agent.
They're just there to go in and like finalize the sale of this castle property that this Count Dracula has bought. And it's so funny reading the first like 5-10 pages because every like couple paragraphs there's some peasant and they're like, oh my god, sir, don't go there, what are you doing? And
Jonathan's
crossing themselves, handing him rosaries, like giving him like mournful looks. At one point, like the guy who like has him on the carriage literally tries to kidnap him to another town so that the count can't have him. And Jonathan's like, weird peasants. Anyway.
Weird peasants. Slightly racist depictions of these peasants. And also, this is beautiful out here. That's the first, like, chapter. And it's like, bro, I have some bad news for you. He does eventually get picked up by a carriage of what we then figure out the person driving, we don't figure out in this journal entry, but later on, retrospectively, we figure out, we know it's Dracula. And so the first depiction of Dracula is, he's described, he has a big beard, which is part of the disguised version of Dracula, and he has red eyes. Dracula always has red eyes, which I think is cool. But like, I think it's important we just keep like kind of create a basis of what Dracula is described as we go through. And
he's got that aquiline nose.
What's that word you said?
Aquiline?
I don't know. I've never heard it out loud. I've only ever read it and just skip it and just say, okay.
Well, it just means it's like a really cool, fancy nose.
All right.
Like really prominent.
Yeah. Yeah. He also has sharp teeth. He's pretty pale. And this version of him has a beard. And also, there's like wolves just like going crazy. Yeah.
And that was like such a wild part because as I was rereading it, I was like, man, what the hell is going on? I hope Janessa knows when we talk about it. I figured it out later, but...
Yeah. The Twilightification of my brain was like, when it read that there was wolves interacting with what we now know as Dracula, I was like, but werewolves and vampires are against each other. And that's the Twilightification.
Well, to be fair...
And I also had just finished rereading Twilight before I read this book. So...
In all fairness to you... It's not just a Twilight thing. It is a pretty popular like media thing in general. But in this particular version, the wolves are his servants, kind of.
He can just like influence them.
Yeah, he can
like
influence
not
them.
Control them like a puppet, but more like y'all should like do this, and then they're like, okay, right,
yeah.
Eventually, they get to Castle Dracula, and it is huge and creepy and dusty and empty, and every like. Furniture has not been used in years and no one's there.
It's this huge house, and that's where Jonathan's like, that's the thing that I think freaks Jonathan out the most.
Where he sees Dracula make his bed because there's no servants.
He's like, but he's a nobleman, he can't do that.
This poor British man. The decorum.
Like one of the notes I wrote that I just didn't remember how much atmosphere was really set up because I always like the first time I read this book my eyes glazed over in the first section because I think
the first section is interesting.
Yeah, no, it is. Okay. I was just 12, 13.
How 14. Did you read this?
I don't know. Somewhere in the teenage years, man.
Everything at Castle Dracula, I was like into it. And this is like, I was like creeped out for Jonathan. I was like, dude, I know what's going to happen and how you're going to do this. But that's because, you know, I live hundreds of years later after this book has been published. So obviously it's in the zeitgeist of the world. But I loved him like being like, okay, I'm going to start writing in shorthand now so that Dracula can't read my fucking notes and know what I'm thinking, which I'm like, that's smart. And I'm like sitting here being like, should I learn shorthand?
And then he's also like, man, I really hope like if something horrible happens, Mina gets my journal so she knows what happened. And I'm like, oh my God, Jonathan Harker, wife guy. I love all the like tiny little hints that are happening throughout the like story. Because obviously we know Dracula is a vampire.
Yes.
And that's kind of one of the hard things about reading this book.
Yes.
Is it's like the Treasure Island thing where you're sitting there and you're like, Long John's a pirate, man. Why are you sitting here being like, he's my best friend? Of course, Jonathan doesn't know that Dracula's a vampire. Why would your first assumption be that the kind of weird foreigner you met is a vampire?
Racism.
I mean, yes, but he's
a product of his time.
He's a product of his time. So he's going to see this like nobleman and be like, oh, yes, what a trustworthy fellow.
Yeah.
And then, but all these little hints that are talking about like how Dracula's like, oh yeah, I don't sup. I don't like, you city folk lack the instincts of a hunter.
Yeah.
Like all of these like historical events that have happened here and like all of these things. And like he spoke like he
knows
there.
So many details about history that Harker's like, what happened? With who? Yeah.
And then my other favorite part is Jonathan like talking to him about the house that he's gonna buy, Dracula's gonna buy in London. And he's like, by the way, it's kind of old and creepy. And Dracula's like, yeah, that's fine.
That's the vibe. Can't you tell from this old and creepy empty castle that I've locked you in, sir? I don't think Harker can pick up on context clues.
No, he really can't. Though, to be fair to him, when he starts to pick up that scary stuff is happening, like Dracula in the mirror,
him making his bed. Gasp! A nobleman making a bed.
I know. He stooped himself so low, like, oh my gosh. Then like all the doors being locked and not having a way out. All of those things, he's kind of like, this is scary as shit, but I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna like chill.
Yeah.
And pretend that this is fine.
Yeah, which is what a man way of approaching terror and danger. Yeah.
Especially the terror and danger of being locked into a stranger's house.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be okay with it or pretend to be okay with it and sit, and I'm just in here like, here are the first 5 things I would do to get out of this house. I might die, but you know what? At least I'd be dead.
True. I mean, here's the real thing. Here's the real tea. If I went to a foreign country to like do business, and all of the people who were surrounding this country
saying this is not good.
They were like, "Oh my God, do you have to go? Oh my God,
Crossing
are you
themselves.
sure? Are you like, do you need to do this?" I'd be like, you know, I'm gonna dip.
Yeah, but we have survival instincts.
Yeah, we have survival instincts, and Jonathan, God bless.
I mean, but we need it for the creepiness.
Well,
and it makes it also exciting.
Again, it goes back to that like, why would Jonathan assume that, like, he's, again, product of his time. Yeah. Of course, the peasants are just being silly and superstitious. And the bear and, like, the whatever, boyar, whatever they call him, he's clearly just a nice man who is a little quirky.
Yeah. Quirky rich man. Never do anything wrong, right?
Yeah, right? And then he crawls out a window like a lizard.
It's still, every time I think about Harker looking out and seeing Dracula climb down, face down the wall, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. Like, I feel like his like bones like change too. Like, you know, like Ilfa in fucking that D20.
Oh yeah. Never After.
And Never After, where she like turns.
Oh, and then you can hear like the bones crunch.
That's what I picture. And okay, side note: if Dracula was a D&D class, what would he be? There's no vampires in in classic.
So I got 2 thoughts.
Yes.
1, blood hunter.
Which is for dum-dums like me.
It's I don't know a lot about it, to be honest.
Well, like,
it's
is it a
a D&D class that was invented by Matthew Mercer for Critical Role.
Okay, well that doesn't count. I'm not classic.
No, but it's on the D&D
I
Beyond.
know, but I'm talking about just like the basic bitch ones that Janessa knows.
The basic bitch ones that Janessa knows. I think it comes down to either ranger or fighter for me.
Okay.
Because favored terrain, like being able to track people like long distances.
The animal connection.
Some magic shit. All that screams ranger to me. But rangers are also a little weak in D&D, especially 5e.
I mean, because they can't suck blood. Whereas Dracula can suck blood. So.
True. I mean, the real thing is, like, a vampire has a stat block, so.
I know, but I was just curious. So I was like, let's just, this is a fun little side note I just thought of at the moment. Okay.
You could make the argument for barbarian, too, just because, like, the blood rage part of it.
The blood rage, and it's only sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I that one's kind of iffy. I'd rather.
I think ranger makes more sense.
I think ranger makes more sense with maybe, like, a multi-class in warlock.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So after the creepy Dracula climbing down a wall bit, like Jonathan decides, hey, maybe I should like try to get into some of these locked places and figure out what the fuck's going on.
Yeah.
And I'm
maybe I
like,
should take some action.
Yeah.
And I'll just sit in my bed and write in a shorthand about how I love my wife.
Yeah. So he goes over and he finds like, and he's like, oh, this is the women's section of the castle. I'm safe. And I'm like, shut the fuck up.
This book's so gay.
This book is so gay.
It's so gay. Yeah, he's putting women on the pedestal in the way that society of his time agrees with. Right? And we'll talk about that like a little bit later once we get out of the castle. But like we start to see it here with Harker kind of being emasculated. He's the damsel in distress. Currently in the situation, right?
Oh yeah, because he gets into this section and he like, despite Dracula being like, "Hey, don't fall asleep anywhere but your room," he falls asleep.
Well, he's like hallucinated to fall asleep. So he goes into a locked room and he's like, "That's a comfy bed," and then he's like, "There's some mist in here. That's weird," and you're like, "Oh yeah." Weird mystical mist.
Jonathan, you're making it really hard to argue that you're making good choices sometimes, man.
Yeah. And out of the mist comes the three vampiresses, or the three brides of Dracula. Yeah. That's what they're referred to.
I would just like to take a second to point out, though, in the actual book, they don't call them the brides of Dracula. No. It's just how they are viewed in culture.
It's in culture and like in the analysis of the book as well.
Yeah.
Which I think makes sense. And it's easier to say three brides instead of three vampiresses.
Yeah.
But that's on the word vampiresses.
I think that's a weird bad word.
It is.
Why does vampire have to be gendered?
Because of the patriarchy.
Well, I refuse to subscribe to that.
Love that for you.
Yeah, so the three brides of Dracula come in and they almost like...
They like are seducing / attacking him.
And he's like, I'm uncomfortable. My wife? My wife?
Yeah, and then before they're able to like fully bite him.
My fiance, sorry.
Fiance. Before they are fully able to attack him, Dracula rushes in,
swoops in, and says, "You're not to touch him. Only I can touch him."
He says, "He's mine tonight. I get him first." And it's like so homoerotic and so
big. No one touches her energy.
Yes.
And it's like, oh my god, why are there not more gay Dracula adaptations? Enemies to lovers 42K.
Yes. Yes.
And then they eat a baby, which really ruins the vibe.
It does. But like, I think it's important that we have three women here trying to go after this man. And like this does get mirrored later on. And so it is interesting that obviously he chose, it's not like a sneaky way of mirroring. It's like, it's very obvious. Oh, three women here are trying to prey on this one man. Whereas later on we have the opposite. And it's like, wow, Stoker really thought he was cooking with that one.
Yeah, he really did.
But I think the most interesting part here is, two things I find interesting this part is that the three brides.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm not going to correct you again about this.
The three brides are one-dimensional, like the other women for a lot of the book. and they don't really do much in the book, which I think is boring.
I think Mina's two-dimensional.
We can get to Mina later. But like, I think it's really interesting that he introduces the really cool, interesting part of these 3 brides, and then they have like 2-3 scenes, maybe 4 max, and they're like just like barely there. And since this book has been like claimed to be a response to Camilla, the lesbian vampire, it's like this seems like a dig, you know? And with Dracula being the one to say, like, it's a little sketchy there. And then too, I just really love the repressedness of Dracula and Harker in this moment. I think it's very interesting and one of the best parts.
It's also kind of wild because, like, and this is a theme throughout the book, and maybe we've already talked about this, but the way that Bram Stoker approaches sexuality is this weird, it's a very Victorian man thing. Oh my God, these women are so voluptuous and sexy and they're gonna ruin me. But also, it's hot.
Well, it's more like then it was like women couldn't do it. Like they couldn't like anything salacious. They were like thrown out. It's like very similar like toxic masculinity that we have today in our society, but times 10 because women were like could not do anything without being like thrown out and like being like just ashamed. Whereas men were like, it was good to be like a scoundrel as long as you were rich, to be like a scoundrel and like you didn't get in trouble for being salacious and stuff.
As long as you kind of kept it like under the table.
Yeah,
like you keep your mistress in a nice little house and you don't bring her to like events and like, you know, if she, God forbid, gets pregnant, you like provide for them and send them away. Like that's all you got to do.
Yeah.
And that's totally fine. Whereas, you know, you're a woman.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. But after this event, Harker's like, okay, so they are vampires. I got the proof.
No, but also he sits there and he's like, that was a dream.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
That's a dream. And I'm like, baby, you're making it so hard for me to say that you're making good choices.
Yeah.
It's not a dream.
It's not a dream. But then he says that, but he also like starts putting clues together.
Yeah.
Like maybe subconsciously.
I mean, it's also probably this is like a defense mechanism because if I also, for whatever reason, if I was in the situation of I'm in a house full of vampires, first of all, I'm jumping out the window. Second of all, there's a response. There's a very valid fear response of I'm gonna rationalize this so I don't freak the fuck out.
Yeah.
He tries to like send word to a bunch of Romani people outside. Surprise, Romani people are evil. Man, that sucked.
What a racist take, Stoker.
Yep.
Of the time, still racist.
Yeah. Oh, another gay moment. After Dracula like saves him, there's this like little exchange where like I don't remember how it comes up, but Dracula looks at Jonathan and he says, "Yes, I too can love."
Yeah. It's like out of nowhere too. It's like maybe Harker's talking about Mina, maybe, but like I have it somewhere in my notes on what like page and stuff it's at, but it feels so out of the blue for Dracula because whenever Dracula's talking, he's talking about his like nobility, he's talking about Englishmen as a concept, he's talking about the histories, he's talking about the real estate, and then we have the one scene of him saving Harker, and then he randomly is like, "I too can love," and it's like, sir, sir, you're real lonely in this castle. Yeah.
And it's also like one of the things that I think Dracula as a book sort of fails at is like this really interesting tension between Dracula and Jonathan doesn't really come up again.
Yeah. It's just like Dracula's trying to claim ownership of John, and
when he fails, he's not interested anymore.
Yeah, which very man-coded.
Very man-coded.
But yeah, after Harker has gone through the situation and he's like, okay, I actually have to take some action now. He decides that he too is going to climb down the side of the castle and sneak into Dracula's lair.
Yep.
/ room. And it's like empty and weird, which is weird. Like,
and he finds a whole bunch of treasure from like days long past, and he takes some money because all of his shit's been stolen.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
in my head when he took that money, I was like, you haven't watched the Pirates of the Caribbean. That treasure is cursed. It's
I
not.
love that for you.
But like in my head, I was like, that's cursed treasure. You're going to turn into a skeleton like Johnny Depp.
but then he can't die.
Yeah, but that's neither. I mean, why not just become a vampire then?
Fair enough.
Well, because God and shit.
I don't know. What are the like theological implications of the Curse of the Black Pearl? What do you think?
The Curse of the Black Pearl?
Yeah, you know, the one where it's like, you know, because like the vampires, they make a huge big deal about how they don't have souls anymore and their like bodies aren't in their graves and yada, yada, yada. So if you become a skeleton.
I think it's more about, it's like more about a lesson about greed. I think that's what most pirate fiction is about, is the power of greed and colonialism.
Greed and colonialism.
That's like my BS English major off the top of my head.
I mean, honestly, that's why you're an English major. That was some pretty good BS off the top of your head.
Thank you. He's in Dracula's room, and then he like finds like a side door that's supposed to be like for servants or something, and he follows it through like a hallway, and he gets to like what I in my head imagine like a creepy like cave like room. It's not. It's just another room. But in my head, it was like super creepy, and there's a bunch of boxes of dirt, and he's like, interesting. Is he a gardener? Walls. But he looks in one of the boxes and there is Dracula, unconscious, eyes open.
And Jonathan, doing something smart for once, like grabs like a shovel or a spade or whatever and like goes to hit him. And then Dracula's like, bitch, you thought, and stops him. And then I don't remember what happens after that.
I think he hits him in the head all the way.
Yeah, he hits him on the head all the way.
Yeah, but it's not knocked out.
It's not knocked out. He's not. He has a mark on his head, but he doesn't like die.
Yeah. So this is all during the part Dracula has been creating this plan, making Harker send out fake letters saying, "I have left. I am feeling good. Everything is fine." And then has told him this plan, like this, like not. He didn't really tell the plan, but he's like, we're gonna travel and you're coming with me to help me settle in the world of the Englishmen. And Harker's like, okay.
I thought he was leaving him in the castle.
That was before the like him trying to contact the Romani people.
Yeah.
But then once Harker tries to escape, he's like, just kidding, you're trapped here forever.
You're coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right.
And so then this happens,
and then there's also that really clever part that where like Jonathan tries to write the letter in shorthand, and then Dracula's like, I can't read that. You're gonna read it, and you're gonna write it in English. And it's also really cool because Jonathan has this moment where, once again, I'm like, yay, you did something kind of smart, even though it doesn't work. Where he's like, hey, why can't I leave like tonight? Why do I have to wait till like tomorrow morning? Like I should just go ahead. And he's like, I mean, you can't. And Dracula's like, oh, I mean, you can.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the gates and there's a whole bunch of wolves.
Yeah.
And it's like, ooh.
Also, when he finds Dracula laying in the box, he like looks like he's, quote, looking half his youth, and like his lips are like red and like a little blood on them, and his like he's looking healthier. And this is after I think Dracula goes out and like disappears for a while one night. So like we are now getting the hint that part of Dracula's whole thing is when vampires feed. Within this book, like obviously we know vampires in general. It's like really hard to disconnect what you know pop culturally about vampires and just what is this book saying about vampires. But
and then there's also this lady who's like, I want my baby, and I'm like, ooh,
yeah. But so we now know that after the vampires drink some blood, they gain some youth, and so in this way, like youthfulness is power, kind of like a symbol,
and also
as we go
sexiness.
Through. Yes. That's like essentially the end of the first section.
Yeah, Jonathan's like, hey, I need to leave. If I don't survive, I really hope this journal makes it to Mina so she knows what happened to me.
Yeah, and that's like the end of the
And then
part.
let's fucking go. It's Mina's turn.
So the book switches from here, right? It's epistolary, like we talked about earlier.
Found footage book.
Huh?
Found footage. Sorry. Never
found footage. Yeah, the found footage book. And it switches from Harker's diary to we start getting letters thrown in instead of just Harker's
diaries.
Yeah.
It's like it's a mix. It starts becoming more like a real like kind of scrapbooky kind of thing of like there's journal entries, there's letters. The first of which being these kind of like, I saw someone describe it as inane, and I think that's a very good way to put it, of just these like inane letters back and forth between this
that has like one line, maybe two of importance, and the rest is just British bullshit.
It's British like upper class bullshit, and like look, because I am British coded, I really like it, but I also recognize that like it can be such a turn off to go from like big spooky atmosphere to, oh no, who am I going to marry?
Yeah. And it is at first a big like, what? Like record scratch.
It's like a huge tone shift. And I just kind of like, was this one in your research notes, these things? Mm-hmm. Did you find out, is this one of those books that was like released chapter by chapter?
No.
Oh, damn.
No. If it was a serialized book, that would be way more interesting.
Yeah, because then they would have had to make it interesting every chapter.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, so Mina is my girly. I love Mina, and I know that she's like a 2D character at best, mm-hmm. but I really like her because it's just kind of and I thought about it mm-hmm. more, mm-hmm. and it's because I read this when I was in my reading classic series, mm-hmm. and the books that I had read before this, Picture of Dorian Gray, yeah, exactly, like I like it. Female characters,
no,
non-existent / terrible, mm-hmm. and Three Musketeers, which I really like Three Musketeers. But the way they treat women in that book is no bueno at all. So, like, Mina was very refreshing because it's like, oh, here's a character who does things and is smart. And
I mean, she's the most interesting character in the book besides Dracula, in my opinion. Like, Dracula's interesting because he's a vampire, not because of any of his actual characteristics, right? Like,
I think Van Helsing's kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Van Helsing. Yeah. So there's three solid characters that I'm like actively interested in throughout this. Mm-hmm. Lucy has moments. Mm-hmm. The men I don't care about.
So Mina and Lucy, childhood friends, slightly gay for each other because it's the mm-hmm. inherent homoeroticism of Victorian England friendships.
Yes.
Lucy is sitting there and she's like, oh no, 3 men proposed to me at the mm-hmm. same day and mm-hmm. I don't want to hurt any of their feelings. And I'm like, girl, rip Lucy, you would have loved polyamory. So her 3 suitors are John Seward,
mm-hmm. who's a quote doctor. He's called doctor in here.
He's like a psychologist.
He's a psychologist
who has an insane asylum
in the Victorian England. So he's not ethically okay or morally all right, but he is quote a doctor.
Mm-hmm. 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 And then there's Quincy Morris, who's like this Texas cowboy in this gothic horror novel.
Yep.
And honestly, like he doesn't have any. I think he would be more interesting if he had a viewpoint chapter.
Yes.
Or like literally if we just saw something from his perspective, because mm-hmm. he's just kind of like, shit, I'm here.
Yeah.
And then there's Vanilla Man.
Arthur.
What's his face?
With a weird last name. I just call him Arthur.
Yeah, he's the one that Lucy ends up picking. Yeah. And I'm like, girl, not the cowboy?
Yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing here. So we have these 3 men, and they're all like besties for various reasons.
They went on these adventures
together. But it's really important that they are all like considered noble here. Like even the American is considered noble because he's rich, right?
Cattle farmer.
Yeah. It's also important here that Stoker was an Americanophile, and he was obsessed with Twain and Walt Whitman, and he ended up becoming buds with both of them, but he literally sent fan letters before he met Whitman in person to Whitman, and they ended up like rumored to have a romantic relationship later on. So like we talked about earlier about how Stoker and the Dracula and Harker repress sexuality of it all, but it also comes in here with like how he includes an American randomly. I think it's an homage to his American author buds, but also a lot of this book talks about new versus old or mm-hmm. new world versus old world, and we see that with these men, right? Because we have Van Helsing, who is old world, we have Dracula, who is old world, and then there's 3 men who are new world, more or less.
The vanilla guy's new world?
I mean, they're just younger, but like of the men, right?
Yeah.
The mirroring. And then the women, we have Mina, who is the old world or like traditional Victorian women, where she's very proper. She supports her husband with all of her jobs. She
learns shorthand so that she can help him as a solicitor.
She's not salacious. Whereas we have Lucy here, who
is kind of flighty,
and her name's Lucy Westerna. So people are like, she's literally, her name means light of the West, or light, which West being like New World. Right, that's like what some scholars like to argue. Whether or not you think there's validity in that, it's up to you. But Lucy she's not like scandalous like what we would think is scandalous. She's just talking to a lot of men mm-hmm. and has all of their attention mm-hmm. and is kind of like quirky. and non-traditional.
Yeah.
And therefore salacious.
Yeah.
But like still, because she's noble, it's okay.
I feel like there's kind of a characterization of Lucy that comes out where she's like this, where she's like a slut. And I don't think that's fair. I think she's just...
No, she's not. She's not. Being salacious and being a slut are different.
Yeah.
In this world especially.
And she's just like, she's such a teenage girl.
Yes.
And it's like, that's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of wild to like read it from this Bram Stoker guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who I'm sure talked to many teenage girls.
But anyways, we find out, yes, Lucy has chosen to marry Arthur Hornwood. That's his name.
I really don't care.
Yeah, no one cares. But Mina and Lucy end up going on a little holiday, seaside holiday, to the town of Whitby, which is adorable if you want to Google it. It's I want to go to Whitby so bad after Googling. It just looks so cute. They're hanging out by the sea, but some odd things start happening. They meet this old sailorman. This is like the first...
Oh, sorry, real fast.
Yeah.
Before we talk about the old sailor man, one of the things that I really do want to give credit to Bram Stoker for is he really does a good job of distinguishing the different styles of writing.
Yes.
Like Jonathan's really, really detailed all the time and also really oblivious. And Mina's very like, this is the point, this is what we need to talk about, and bada bing, bada boom, bada ding.
Yeah.
Whereas Lucy's like, la 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 la.
Yeah.
And I think it's just really a nice little touch of writing.
It is. Yeah. It's just, I wish we got, I agree, I wish we got some of Quincy's POV, and I wish we got less of Seward's as we go on. There's just so much of him.
And then also,
like, I understand plot-wise, but it's just like, bleh.
No, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And then, but the downside to that is when he wants to transcribe these accents, like especially from lower class people,
Yes.
they are more incomprehensible than the Dutch guy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the way Stoker writes the main characters / noble people is like, it's very racist. And like, yes, there's like, it's hard because like you want, if you are in a small town on the coast of England, the people there are going to have a really strong accent, regional accents. And there is a way that you can phonetically write folks talking in regional accents without them
coming off as uneducated bumpkins.
Yes. But unfortunately that's the way that Stoker writes and refers to anyone that is not noble in this book.
Noble or noble adjacent,
or noble besties, like
the
Harker.
poor best friends.
Yeah, exactly. So this old man, I know so many old fishermen at the bars in my hometown that are just like him, so I like recognized the vibe that he has, but also he is unfortunately afflicted by Stoker's classism. Yeah.
I read this bit and my brain went, I don't understand why we're talking about this.
That's why we have to get the audiobooks, and the audiobooks with multiple different cast members doing it, and then they have all the different accents. It's like a movie.
Well, but the thing is, I like started to put together, maybe it's like this deep metaphor about like souls rising to heaven and like the like connection with Judgment Day and the rapture, and you're shaking your head at me, which means I know I'm wrong, and it's just comedic relief.
You could... I think it's half comedic relief and half trying to add some of the spookiness from that we just left in Transylvania and bring it in England. And it doesn't work. And like the longer they're in Whitby, the creepier it gets because
then Lucy starts sleepwalking and
so it builds on itself, but it is also just the old fisherman is just half comedic relief, but it is like spooky.
Well, and the story, and to the credit, the story about the like suicide, and that's what Lucy gets drawn to when she's sleepwalking, is she gets drawn to that graveyard. Yeah. And then things happen. But first we got to talk about Seward, because he has that bug eating bit, and that makes me want to puke.
So Seward has a patient referred to as Renfield, and before rereading this for the podcast, I always, from pop culture, vampire, Dracula stuff, I always thought of Renfield as like his assistant that was like hanging with him, like what's his face in Dr. Frankenstein, Igor. Like I thought Renfield was the Igor of this story, and like rereading this, I was like, oh no, he's just like a patient that is important as the story goes, and also creepy as fuck.
And
but
it has some connection to Dracula, but it's not explicit.
It's not, yeah. But Stewart goes into this whole description about how Renfield is attracting flies with sugar, and then he ends up eating the flies, and then soon he gets spiders to eat the flies, and then he eats those spiders, and then he eventually gets a sparrow to eat the flies that are eating a sparrow to eat the spider that's eating the flies that eats the sugar, and then he eventually eats
the bird raw.
The sparrow raw. And then he asks for a cat, and then Stuart's like, maybe a cat would be good for him.
Well, in all fairness, he's like, I kind of want to see what he would do, which is worse. And then he's like, no, I'm not going to do that because he'll probably just kill it. And I'm like, no shit.
It's so gross.
Seward is the most boring of the point of views.
Yes.
Because he's just, it feels the most like I'm just reading a Victorian novel. Mm-hmm. Which,
yeah. Boring.
Yeah. I mean, it's very like it's one of those things that the first time I read it, I was glazing over because I'm like, why the hell are we talking about this insane asylum?
Yep.
And it becomes important at the end, and I was like, oh shit. And so second readings, I paid more attention.
Yeah.
/3/4th, whatever this was.
Yeah. Mina gets her first letter from John, and the audience knows it's one of the fake letters that he was forced to write saying that they have left the castle.
She's like, oh yay, my husband's coming home.
But that same night, Lucy starts to sleepwalk, which she used to sleepwalk when she was younger. So it's not like a random thing that never happened, but it hasn't happened in years, right? And then we have a lot of days of no news from Harker, and this is getting Mina worried. And then also a storm is starting to come closer to the coast, which is also making folks, locals, be like, this is a weird time of year for a storm. The storm doesn't acting like the normal one. And then the fishermen talk about how they don't recognize a boat out there, and it's like a Russian boat they can tell, but they don't recognize it. But then we get our first newspaper clipping, which is boring,
yeah,
but important, a lot of this book.
Well, it talks about how this ship washed up, and then there's a dog ran off of the boat, and then the captain was found strapped to the wheel with a rosary attached to himself.
And then later we get the actual log of the Demeter.
This is so cool.
That's the cool part. Yeah.
And it's I'm so glad that they made that movie that just came out about it, The Voyage of the Demeter, where they focus solely on this part of the story. Because really, when we talk about adaptation next couple weeks, the big thing that I feel gets missed is Dracula is better if you just cut it up into the pieces.
Yeah.
Because if you try to do the whole story, you're going to have... It's too long. The story drops off in pieces, and it's just there's stuff you got to cut, and then stuff you got to keep, and then if you cut stuff, you then cut up important things.
Yeah.
So it's a whole thing.
No, absolutely. I agree.
So I'm really glad that they made a movie just about this voyage. I'm never going to watch it because I'm a chicken, but I'm really glad they made it. Everyone disappears one by one in the middle of the night. They get too tired to have double watches. And then one night, the second in command on the ship sends there, talks to the captain. He's like, we're all lost. It's better to die now. And he jumps off. And then the captain's like, the fuck?
And straps himself to the
and straps himself to the wheel with the rosary.
Yeah, so that someone will find the boat.
Someone will find the boat. And also, Dracula can't steer the boat because the rosary's on it. So he has to, do all the storm shit.
Yep. Yeah. So we can add to our, tracking of what the vampires can do here. We know that they have some sort of connection with wolves. The audience can put this together. Right, it's not explicit yet, but he has to be sleeping on dirt because we know there's boxes of dirt. Right, and we know that he comes out at night because Harker never saw him in the daytime, and now we know the mist aspect. He can vampires turn into mist, and also he can control the weather.
It seemed like they implied that he was strongest at twilight and
dawn.
Thank you.
Yeah. He's he has his powers throughout the night, but those are the two strong points. But they don't get that specific yet.
No, they talk about it a little bit at the Harker mentioned something about seeing him transform at those times.
Oh, okay.
So
Mina wakes up the next night or so. The timeline gets a little bit wimbly wombly here. But it's like it's fine for
Dates
our
are
purposes.
shifting all over the place.
Yeah, but like so if you want to like go and like look at the detail, it is pretty cool what information is found on what days. But for our purposes for the podcast, I don't think that's that important.
If you are interested in that, there's 2 things that we can recommend. First of all, there's Dracula Daily, which they email you like correspondence basically based on the dates.
That's cool.
It is pretty cool. And it's honestly responsible for the wife guy joke that I made earlier. Because everyone was like, "Oh my God, Jonathan Harker's such a wife guy." And I'm like, I've been trying to say this for 5 years. Not the point. The other thing is, like, there's a Dracula podcast, which is similar to Dracula Daily. But, like, these voice actors come together and they, like, basically release an episode based off of, like, the entries of the day.
That's cool.
It is really cool.
So Mina finds Lucy out of bed, and she goes looking for her, and Lucy is found in the cemetery, and it's a full moon, and she sees Lucy's, like, sitting down or, like, on a bench or some sort, and there's like a something hovering over her that's white face, red eyes, and then as soon as Mina gets over to Lucy, it's gone. And like a good Victorian girl, she's like, "Oh, you need to be covered up with a shawl. That's the first thing you need to do." And as she's putting the shawl on, she thinks she like cuts Lucy's neck with the buttons or the fastenings,
The brooch, yeah.
But we're like, the audience is like, "Bitch, she just got bitten." But we get the spookiness is happening. Over the next few nights, Lucy starts to try to escape. She starts pointing out at bats outside of her window, and
saying stuff about, like, his red eyes.
His red eyes are glowing. Yeah, exactly. Mina, one time at night, goes on a walk because she just, like, needs space from her friend that is acting bonkers, which is fair. And she looks up at the window and she sees Lucy talking to a, quote, big bird outside, which, like, it's a bat, but like she thinks it's a bird, and it adds to the mystery, right?
Well, they kind of like, I think, like, you know, the bat thing becomes a vampire thing because of like the connections to the vampire bat and all that. But I think they really do imply that Dracula can turn into like a bird for shits and giggles.
Why be a bird when you can be a bat, in my opinion? But you know,
why be a bat when you can be a bird?
There's too many birders in this.
No, but bats, like, I like bats. They're really cool. But if you look too long at their wings, it gets really freaky really fast.
With their little hands.
The little hands and the stretched out skin.
I think it's
like,
cool.
Oh, like webbed hands.
When she comes back from her walk, Mina notices that Lucy is like holding her neck while she's asleep. Drama's happening while they're in Whitby, but soon Lucy decides to go back to London because she's engaged and she wants to go be with Arthur.
And also she gets a letter that her mom is sick.
Yeah, her mom's not feeling well,
which she's actually dying, and she decides to tell everyone but Lucy, which is like, ma'am, respectfully,
yeah.
Far be it for me to tell you how to live your life.
Yeah. We start getting like little letters from like delivery folks about boxes being delivered different areas. And we're like, that's the reader. Like, unless you are like keeping up with every single detail, which is a lot of details in this huge ass book. But like, as the reader, we're like, we don't know really, unless you're paying attention, like why we care about these delivery boxes. But then you think about it. Oh, the boxes.
The boxes of dirt. And then it's also kind of, this is the part where I'm like, I love this epistolary part of this novel because I think it really does a cool job of bringing all these pieces together and creating a really cool atmosphere.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but Bram Stoker needed someone who was willing to tell him, hey, maybe let's cut this.
Yeah. He needed a few edits. Yeah. And as Lucy's going back to London, Mina gets a letter from a nurse saying that Jonathan has been found in Budapest and is sick in the hospital. And so she rushes to go help her fiance.
And it's really cute because they get married like right away. It's not like, oh, we got to get married because you're going to die. It's we've been putting this off so long and we've been separated. Let's get married. And Jonathan's also like, I don't want there to be any secrets between us. This book is scary and I don't even really remember what I wrote in it.
Yeah.
If you want to read it, you can, but I don't think I'm going to. And she's like, cool, let's seal it up in wax and never open it.
Yeah. But he also is like, yeah, exactly. Like if something happens, you can read it, but I'd rather you not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is
if it,
good move. Good move on him.
Yeah, because Mina's like, yeah, I mean, unless it becomes absolutely necessary, I won't read the book.
And it adds to the mystery too, because now we know the knowledge that is in that book, the audience, but the characters don't. And being like, we're not going to find out what's in that book, which is like a lot of information, which though, like if they read it right now without any other evidence, they're going to think he's lost his mind, right?
Yes.
So like it does also make sense that they want to wait a little bit. So as Mina's gone to Budapest to be with Harker and Lucy's gone back to London, we find out that Renfield's starting to like try to escape nightly almost, and he starts saying the master is at hand. And so we know that something is happening with Lucy with this like sleepwalking red eye figure. Like we know Dracula has red eyes.
Yep.
So like we know he's there.
We know he's there, but nobody has any kind of other context because, like, Mina hasn't read the book. Jonathan's not in his right mind.
Yeah.
And also, like, even if he was in his right mind, why would he tell them about this scary-ass guy?
Exactly. And so as Lucy goes to London, we can just assume that also means that Dracula is also there. And then once Renfield starts saying the master is at hand, the asylum is in London, we're like, okay, Dracula's there.
Dracula's in London.
Yeah.
And then there comes this really like interesting bit of Lucy kind of Lucy keeps getting weaker and weaker and weaker like with each passing day. So her vanilla fiance, and are they married yet?
They're not married, no. And also Arthur's dad is also dying.
Sick and dying. So Arthur's busy dealing with that. But he writes to Dr. Seward and is like, hey, remember that girl that you proposed to and that she totally rejected you? That's now my fiance. Can you go check on her? Because she's been really sick.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, I don't like Seward because he's boring and also immoral. But damn, that would that would really suck.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lucy, at this point, we get her diary. She's having weird dreams. When Seward's like checking in on Lucy, both Lucy and her mom are sick. We know, the audience knows her mom's been sick for longer than the vampire being around, but she could also be affected. We don't really know for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to do with her heart, so she doesn't have the same symptoms.
Yeah.
It's like a big shock is going to kill her.
And then quote anemia. Sorry.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
It's not real anemia.
Oh,
as in like being like lack of like
iron in the blood.
They mean it as lack of blood.
Oh.
That's what they mean when they say anemia here.
So John Seward's like, hey, this is weird. Let me call my old friend Van Helsing, who used to be my professor. And I'm like, Van Helsing, the man, the myth,
he is
the legend.
So eclectic. He's a professor. He is also like, he has like a bajillion doctorates.
He's like the archetype of this quirky professor who has all of these random pieces of knowledge.
Yes.
And like he speaks in these like big metaphors half the time. This is the only time where like Stoker transcribing an accent doesn't bother me because it's like, it's still legible.
Yeah.
Because the things that Van Helsing says.
Well, it's because he's educated.
Exactly.
And he's rich.
The thing that Van Helsing says is stuff that Bram Stoker thinks is worth listening to.
Yes.
And so they're like, oh, we're going to do blood transfusions. And I'm sitting there being like, first time I read this book, I have a very distinctive memory of being in the metro station and just sitting there and being like, you can't just do a blood transfusion without checking out, like, if you have the same blood type.
Well, also, blood transfusions are like brand new technology when Stoker was writing this. So at the idea of the blood transfusions, it doesn't make sense with the knowledge that we have about blood types because I don't think they really knew about blood types at this point.
No, they didn't.
But I think it's as a device for like the themes and ideas. I think it's so cool because it's literally new technology is trying to save them, which goes against Dracula, which is the old world. Like it's that new versus old again.
It's that new versus old, and then it's also like we talked about it earlier, the like deconstruction of those gothic horror tropes of like science is actually being helpful and useful, and like because if everything had gone according to plan. Lucy would be okay. Yeah. Because the blood transfusions were working. They were able to keep Dracula out of the house and all this crap.
So they do one transfusion first. So it's Seward to Lucy first. And then Van Helsing also is like, hey, we're going to put garlic fucking everywhere. and this is going to help you. And it does. She starts to feel better after the first transfusion, and there's garlic everywhere.
It's also really funny because, like, the footnote that my book had footnotes, not like yours.
Yeah.
But it was like Van Helsing goes, "Mein Gott," and then the like footnote is like, it's unclear why Van Helsing, who's Dutch, is speaking in German.
Lucy's starting to feel better. But then one night she has like a weird dream and like starts like throwing the garlic out.
Well, Lucy's mom takes off the garlic.
It's her mom, right?
It's her mom who like it's kind of like, is she actually doing this, or is she being influenced to do this?
Exactly.
She takes out the garlic and opens the window. She's like, oh, she needs some fresh air. And I'm like, ma'am. But it's also Van Helsing's like, no, it's my fault for not telling her. And I'm like, I mean, yes, I wonder if you will learn any lessons from this about not telling people information.
Yep.
I sure hope so.
And then she has a second transfusion, this time from Arthur. And she starts getting better again.
But then there's this wolf that like escapes. There's this little bit. And
from
then
the newspaper, right?
The newspaper, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because, like, first of all, the transcribing accents thing comes back.
Yes.
And we hate it. But the wolf like escapes, and they're like, well, why do you think the wolf escaped? And the guy who like runs the wolf cage is like, well, it seems like he wanted to get out.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like,
damn.
I can't tell if this is like supposed to be a slam on the guy, but I'm reading it as a slam against the interviewer. It's like,
it's a slam against the interviewer. It's like, what do you mean? Of course he lives in a cage. He wants to get out.
Like, I don't know why you want me to read the mind of the damn wolf.
Yeah.
Like,
but there's also like, he mentioned seeing that there was a tall guy with red eyes that was freaking out the wolf. So we're like, the audience is like,
and
Dracula.
Then the same night, like a wolf comes in and breaks the window of Lucy's house. And Lucy's mom comes up with her and hangs out with her and tears the garlic off her neck as the wolf like comes in because the big shock has killed her. And it's like, this is suspicious.
We also see, this is when Renfield starts yelling, the blood is life. The blood is the life, over and over.
And then, like, Lucy, this is like Lucy's, when Lucy's having this last entry, it's really, really kind of interesting because you can feel all that dread and terror that she's feeling.
Yeah.
Of like, oh my God, something is happening. I am alone here. Like, she goes and sets her maids up to try to help her. And they're all freaking out because, of course, they're freaking out. There's a dead body in the house. A wolf just broke into the house.
Yep.
And so she's like, okay, go get a glass of wine. And then they take a glass of wine and they all fall asleep.
They've been drugged.
Because they've been drugged. Somebody drugged the wine. So, to reiterate, Lucy's mom comes in, freaks out when the wolf comes and breaks the window, tears the garlic necklace off of Lucy's neck, but somebody drugged the wine and Lucy's mom dies.
And so we're like, how did someone get in without them knowing? So when Lucy, one of the few times she was bitten by Dracula, like between the transfusions, her hallucinative state probably welcomed in Dracula, and which means he has permission to come in that house whenever, right? And so he came in, and we're assuming, right? And he came in and then drugged them.
I mean, I kind of assumed that it was actually like that he hypnotized one of the maids or hypnotized Lucy's mom. Honestly.
Could have been that too. I just figured it was because he already had permission.
Yeah.
That like as soon as like.
But then it wouldn't have been such a big deal if the window was open, right? Because couldn't you just come in the door?
I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe it's
Bram Stoker, literary genius, making us think about things hundreds of years later.
Gross. No one makes me think ever.
So then like Jon Stewart comes to the door the next day, and like this is where I'm like, man, Bram Stoker, sometimes you're writing a really good story and then you throw in this shit about how like
no one answers, and so he freaks out what to do.
No, he freaks out, and then he comes in and he's like, oh my God, these maids are so like freaked out and scared, and they're all such silly little birds. And I'm like, dude, there's a dead body in the house. You be calm about it. They got drugged. Fuck off.
Yeah. So Seward and Van Helsing are there, and then so Quincy arrives, and they end up using Quincy's blood for this is the third transfusion. And as this is happening, they also find Lucy's note. She wrote a note that she tucked into her essentially bra. I don't know how they found that. That's creepy.
Because they were giving her a bath.
Yeah,
which is to warm her up.
Which is creepy. I mean, yes, warm her up, but like,
yeah, I reread that.
Three men giving a unconscious woman a bath.
Yeah, I reread that like three to four times and being like, who gave her the bath? Please be the maids. Please be the maids. And I don't think it was the maids.
Yeah. They fake Lucy's mom death certificate to avoid a scandal because Victorian and rich people. Then Morris references vampire bats because he sees the bite mark and he's like, I saw that back in Texas or some bullshit.
Like South America because he's like, they did these exploring things and like doing all these cool things.
Red flag.
And I just want to like, at this point, I just want to reiterate something. I feel like the Dracula adaptations, yes, the characters as they are written in this story are boring.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have to be if you did a really good adaptation. Because again, you got a mad scientist-esque Dutch doctor who speaks in metaphors and has all this cryptic knowledge. A doctor who works in an insane asylum and has questionable morals. A cowboy. A floppy rich guy, and a guy who stared death in the face because he's a poor lawyer who just didn't want to like be involved.
Trying to do his job.
He's just trying to do his job, and he like stumbled into this shit.
Yeah,
like those are some cool character ideas, and then nobody does anything with them.
Yeah,
including Bram.
Yeah. They're trying to get Lucy back to health. Arthur arrives, so all this is happening. Them giving a bath, but when her fiance is not there. Creepy.
Are we sure that they're not married at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
They don't get married till the very end of
her life.
Yeah.
Wild.
Like deathbed.
Damn.
Yeah. Then we have a letter from Mina to Lucy, and Mina is
it's marked unopened by the receiver, and I'm like, that's so uncalled for. This is making me sad.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And it's just that John has inherited his boss/adoptive family manor, and so now the Harkers have come up in the world, and now they're equal, which is like a huge deal Victorian wise. But us for the us at the reader, we're like, we don't care that they're richer
I'm also
now.
just sitting there being like, it's really fucking convenient that he like put you in the will and then died the next day. What the fuck is up with that?
Yeah, but Seward talks about Renfield yelling at passersby and trying to escape, and he talks to boxes, which are like, well, I wonder what's in those boxes, because they still haven't figured that out. And then the men still don't. Van Helsing, we're like, we're pretty sure he knows. He hasn't said anything yet at this point.
Yeah,
but we're like, he's got to know. But the other three men are still clueless. They're like, she's sick.
She's sick and she's dying, and there's nothing else we can do for her, and it's very sad. And it is actually kind of sad because it's like, you know, they spend so much time trying to save Lucy, but like,
yeah,
both events beyond their control have spiraled.
Yeah,
and them not telling women things really backfired on them. Hope they learn a lesson from that.
So Lucy's like starting to feel a little bit better. Van Helsing has garlic around her neck, but at a night there's like flapping at the window. It's a full moon. They see a bat outside. Lucy rips off the garlic. Van Helsing thinks that she's gonna die any second now because she's just so weak. Lucy tries to kiss Arthur, and Van Helsing stops her. And it's like we realize,
and her eyes flash with like this predatory look.
Van Helsing stops her, and then this is like, I think this is where they get married, right? The deathbed. Yeah, they like have a weird little ceremony, which is like,
and
cool.
She's like, "Thank you for like stopping me," and I'm like,
yeah. So she like knew that she was gonna bite him after she came out of that like
weird like feral
state. Yeah, and then she dies.
Yep.
And then Helsing says or thinks this is not the end, and we're like, Helsing, you know what's up. Tell the rest, please.
And then they like have this little bit where like in the same chapter where Mina and Jonathan are like walking in London, and Mina finds out about like Lucy's death, and they're walking around, and Jonathan sees Dracula.
Yeah,
and he's like, and he has a full PTSD like breakdown.
Yeah, there's a little part in Seward's this next part where Bram talks about through Seward how much he loves America. Like Seward essentially is like, Quincy, you and that Texas thing, that's real good.
Quincy has weird sexual tension with one of like Lucy's suitors. It's the
Seward.
doctor.
Yeah.
It's the doctor.
They have like
that's
this
why.
weird thing. Yeah. And it's just like, we get it, Stoker. You love America. Just move there. He doesn't, but he goes there and hangs out with his friends. Arthur and Lucy don't technically have like an actual marriage ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
They just claim that they're married, and Arthur talks about how his transfusion was equivalent to the marriage ceremony.
Yeah, and they're
here.
all sitting there being like,
And so here we have 3 men have given their blood to Lucy. So this directly mirrors the 3 brides.
yep.
Right? Which I think is so fun, right? We have the vampires are trying to take away the blood, whereas the humans are giving the blood willingly here. And that's like just a really fun way to like mirror the like morality of everything. And
It's really cool. And I
cool.
didn't put that together till you said it.
yeah.
I didn't put it together.
Yeah, so like we have the 3 brides of Dracula, and then we have the 3 husbands of Lucy.
Yeah.
That's what
So
scholars
like
think,
I
like,
got I like put that together, but I didn't put together the transfusion.
Yeah, and
part.
so with the whole like modernity
then
versus traditionalness is that like the vampires represent the old traditional way of this blood issue, and then the new technology of transfusions. It's like
and the consent
it's
and the
new way.
willingness. Yeah, that's really cool.
It's cool.
And
that's the cool part of Dracula.
There's 2 things. One, there's a really fun line of foreshadowing in 182 where they're like, we thought her dying while she slept and sleeping when she died. And it's like, damn.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. We have a newspaper article that talks about how there's children walking around London with that are wounded at the throat. And they're like, weird. But also this is like Victorian England, so there's probably a lot of children wandering out with other ailments.
And they're like, they kept saying that they're following the blue for lady.
Yeah. Say that again?
Blue fur.
I hated that when they kept
Yeah.
saying that, and I was like, God damn these Brits.
Not even goddamn these Brits. It's the goddamn Stoker, like transcribing lowercase accents and not just being like, oh, the pretty lady. Because that's what a normal child would say.
Yeah.
Why would they say beautiful? Like,
I don't know.
It's, whatever, man. Anyway.
Mina gets word of everything happening, and she decides that she's going to prepare to read Jonathan's journal. She hasn't yet, but she's like, I think I should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before that / as that's happening, Van Helsing goes to Seward and he's like, hey, by the way, we need to like dig up Lucy's body and cut out her heart.
And cut off her head.
And cut off her head. And Seward's like, the fuck, Van Helsing?
And that's Seward saying that.
This is like I love it. I like Van Helsing and I get it, but also like this is where you maybe need to be a little less cryptic before you start talking about desecrating dead bodies.
Van Helsing and Seward have this relationship like it's like, it's like mentor student kind of thing. That gets a little, from the past. But I think it's interesting that Van Helsing's like, Seward's not going to care what I say. And also, like, probably language barriers. Like, I'm just going to be blunt just to get through,
Yeah. And then it's also interesting because you brought up that blood transfusion thing. Van Helsing has a full-ass breakdown in the carriage afterwards, like laughing hysterically at the like idea and then breaking down into tears. And it's so wild because, again, as we've talked about, Bram Stoker goes from saying things that are so Victorian England man and then being like, oh yeah, and then Van Helsing cries for 20 minutes and he's still really cool. And I'm like, is the masculinity toxic or not?
Yeah. The Van Helsing goes to talk to Mina to ask about Lucy and what she witnessed in Whitby, just to get like more clarity on the situation. And Mina's like unsure at first, but she's like, but then later she's like, okay, I will talk to you. And talks about the whole night of Lucy sleepwalking. Van Helsing reads Mina's typed journal.
Yeah, because at this point she's read the journal, she's broken the seal on it, and she's like, I need to know what's going on because this is still affecting him like months later.
Yeah, and then so Van Helsing now has access to Harker's journal. So now we're getting all the details from the before Transylvania situation.
I also love the little like the very brief moment of joke that she pulls on him where he's like, hey, can I read the journal? And she gives it to him. And he's like, fuck, it's in shorthand. I don't know shorthand. She's like, I here's the version that's I typed out already.
Here's my thing. Okay, here's the thing with Mina. So Mina, like I said earlier, is one of the most interesting characters in here. I think for a Victorian novel, she is an interesting woman. Like, you know,
the way that everyone else talks about her is really annoying.
It's really annoying, but Mina is like partially a pick-me girl.
Yeah.
She's
a not like other girls.
She's a not like other girls. She, like, yes, it's cool. It's cool to see a woman like trying to, like, in this era in this novel, trying to like get skills that for like the career field, but there to, she says, to help her husband. So like everything is still pointed towards men, and that like, so it's like one step forward, two steps back, and that's how it is every single time for me with Mina. Until like up to the very end, and I think that's why I just don't love her,
and I think that's totally valid.
Yeah,
and I don't disagree. The one thing I would also say is I feel like part of the reason why I like Jonathan and Mina so much is they're so ride or die for each other. So every time that like Jonathan's doing something, it's also for Mina, especially after once he gets back from Dracula's castle.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that didn't like jump out at me when I read this.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's totally fair.
I think compared to the other couples in this book, absolutely.
You compare Mina to like any female character written in this day or age, you're totally right. She's a pick-me.
Yeah.
Like they constantly talk about how she's not like other girls and how she has a man's brain and like all this other stuff where it's just like, Bram Stoker, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. And I think when that, but like I'd have the same issues with any other Victorian novel written by a man, you know, but I also don't read many Victorian novels written by men for this reason, you know? So
yeah,
Mina is like actively helping Van Helsing here and like trying to, you know, talk, and like so far it's the Harkers and Van Helsing who are like on board with this theory.
And it's also like, and then after Van Helsing like tells her, hey, this is what happened, and she's like, okay, so I read this and he's probably not crazy. And then she talks to Jonathan and is like, hey, by the way, and Jonathan's like, oh, thank fuck, I thought I was crazy.
Yeah
It's great.
Yeah.
And then like, you know, Jonathan snaps out of it. Van Helsing goes to Seward and is like, look, these things are happening. We have to tackle this issue now.
The children are getting bitten. So Seward and Van Helsing go to the graveyard and they go and decide to open Lucy's coffin, which is like already breaking so many social norms, right? This is like adding to the like the gothic, like the second half of this book is like it bounces between just being like a Victorian novel to like actually spooky, and so this is like we're starting to get back to the spooky vibes of it all. And they open it and the coffin is empty.
Dun, dun, dun.
But there is a figure in the graveyard with a child, which is interesting. But they are able to scare away the figure, so the kid has no bites, which is nice. Then in the morning, they check the same coffin, and Lucy is there again. They plan how they're gonna destroy Lucy. They decide that they're going to fill her mouth with garlic. They're going to try and cut off her head, and they're going to drive a stake through her body.
Heart. Yep.
Yes.
And then it's also at this point where we cut back to Mina, and like she's compiling all the information that they've had to like kind of put together a little scrapbook of like, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
But this is also like why I think Mina's character in the adaptations gets so fucked over, because like you can't show research in a movie. Well,
at least it's not. It isn't. The vibe, the tone switches too much. Yeah. Before they actually destroy Lucy's body, she gets permission from all three gentlemen. So he's getting permission from all three of Lucy's husbands. If we're thinking that transfusions equals husbands, they get permission from all of them. Arthur is not okay with it, which is fair, but he ends up going along anyways. Well, once he sees Lucy in her vampire form, then he's like, okay, like it takes him seeing, which I think is understandable.
Yeah, totally fair. Yeah. It's really fucked that they make Arthur kill her though.
Yeah, but it's like,
I get the symbolism and I get why they did that, but it's kind of like, yeah, okay, let's traumatize this man. Yeah, this boring ass man who's lost his wife, fiance, and now is losing her again in this exact same way.
Yeah, so they destroy Lucy's body and they lock the tomb, and then they're like, okay, And then Van Helsing's like, and guess what, guys? There's someone else too that we need to take care of. And the boys are like, what? And they're like, yeah, there's this guy Dracula we need to destroy.
And also, like, this is the thing that did this to Lucy.
Yes.
And then the boys are like, yeah.
Mina lets Seward read her diary, or I don't know if he asks or Mina volunteers to type his phonograph diary. So like Seward doesn't write his own stuff down. He has a phonograph that records his thoughts, which is another bit of like technology in here.
Yeah. And it's also it's really funny because at one point later on they get to this thing where they're like, oh my gosh, I don't have my phonograph and I have to write things out and this is so arduous and I hate it. And I'm like, big ass mood, dude. I also hate writing out things, especially things that happened.
And so Mina is not just like typing up the journals, but she's also like organizing the information chronologically, which with the found footage of it all, which is why we're like, oh, this book is how she would have put it together, which is fun. They start to track the boxes because they realize
the boxes are important.
So they start tracking the boxes. So like them putting all these pieces together goes too long, in my opinion. It gets a bit boring.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like it goes on too long, and then the men also like do this dumbass thing where they're like, we're not going to tell Mina things because we don't want to offend her delicate female constitution.
And so they essentially are like, you've been kicked off the island.
Yeah.
And Mina's like, fuck man, that sucks, but guess what? I'm gonna listen
because I'm a good woman, and that's what my husband wants.
And
and then Jonathan is also like, man, I'm so glad that my wife is out of danger and not involved in this dangerous thing.
And then Mina's like, what if I go talk to Renfield?
Yeah, I know. And then like Mina starts having all these weird dreams about like stuff happening in the night, and because no one's fucking telling her anything, she doesn't put together that she is being
and it's just, and like it sucks because we just see the men like get tripped up on these dumb little details, and we're like, check in on Mina, look at her throat, check in on Mina,
look at her throat, talk to Mina because she's smarter than all of you except for maybe Van Helsing sometimes. But Van Helsing's too caught up in his old world prejudice.
Exactly.
Whether or not Bram Stoker meant it or not, though. It's also really cute because Jonathan sits there and he's, in addition to it's fucked that he's like, oh yeah, no, we can shut my wife out. But he's also like, she's so smart and pretty and wonderful for putting all of this information together. She's the best. And I'm like, you're such a simp.
Your obsession with the Harkers, I do not get it. Because
they're
like,
my emotional support straight couple.
They're so boring.
Yeah. Sometimes I like boring people.
Oh, I'm aware.
Like Doctor from Treasure Island. He's boring. Still love him. The little things.
Don't bring up Treasure Island. I'm triggered.
Well, this book is very much like Treasure Island, which is why I like it. There's all these things happening.
Oh, I am aware.
And it should be way more fun than it is.
I understand why you like the books you like.
British coded.
And I will say that they're boring and continue. Anyways.
Honestly, I think that's valid, and you're entitled to your opinions.
Thank
about
you.
That.
So Renfield is begging Stewart to have him be released. He's like, "Hey, you know all the crazy shit I was doing earlier? That wasn't me. I'm normal. I swear I'm normal." and Stewart's like, "This is exactly what an insane person would tell me." And it's like, I think Stewart is inventing reverse psychology.
I don't think Seward can invent anything.
No, of course not, but I think he's thinking he is.
Yeah.
Because he's a man.
Yeah. He actually, he wants to escape to try to help out Mina, because he's like, Mina was nice to me. And now I, care about her safety.
Oh, yeah. Also, the asylum happens to be, next door to that house that Dracula bought.
Oh.
Important to note.
Important to know.
Which is why when Redfield keeps trying to escape, he goes to the next door gates of that, there's a chapel next door. That's part of that mansion house that Dracula bought. Anyways, so Renfield ends up dying. Yep.
He, attacks Dracula straight up.
Well, before that, we don't find out that happens quite yet.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
The men are this is their game plan. Their plan is, Van Helsing's like, we know Dracula has to stay on his original Earth from his home.
Yes.
So these boxes he has sent off everywhere and dispersed everywhere, we need to destroy. And then once they're destroyed, he has to go back home and we can kill him on his way home. Because he can't stay. We know, because after Seward has been like observing Renfield is like a litmus test to the power Dracula has. So at night, between dusk and dawn, Renfield is active. He's doing his weird like yelling, trying to escape, the eating stuff. And then in the daytime, he's more calm, quote, reasonable, right? So this is how they figured not only also the journals of Harker, obviously, but they also confirm it with Renfield
in there. Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, let's go and destroy the boxes. We know where most of them are. Let's go and do that.
Thanks to Mina. You're welcome.
Yes. And also Mina knows all the train schedule, and she like loves to talk about how she knows all the train schedules, and I'm just like, girl, you can read a graph, congratulations. Like, what?
You can read a table, you're so special.
Wow.
Like, oh.
Yeah. And so the boys are off going to the chapel next door to destroy the boxes there, and there's like a horde of rats, but they happen to have rat terriers that they bring with them that destroy the rats. Like it's the
only
fiasco.
thing that the vanilla guy does is that he brings his dogs to destroy the rats.
Yeah, it's a whole fiasco. But as this is happening, we find out that Renfield has let Dracula into the asylum, and this is how Renfield ends up dying, is because of Dracula. And so when the men come back, they're like, oh shit, Renfield's dead. They go look, and they're like, oh, he died from a vampire, we can tell. Right? And then they go and check out Mina, and this is when they just realize
that Dracula's been feeding on Mina.
Yeah.
And it's like the whole thing is written as such like a aftermath of an assault scene.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, like Mina's almost inconsolable. It's probably the most emotional we really see her.
We do hear her like the dream of the night before. We do get her POV from what happened. Like she has like she sees mist, which we know means Dracula. That she felt lethargic. She had weird dreams. She saw red lights that looked like eyes. She saw a vivid white face in her quote dream. And then she got sleepy. Like that's what she remembers.
Yeah.
But it's
like really messed up, and Jonathan comes in and he's like, oh my god, what happened to my wife?
Yeah.
Van Helsing, is she okay? And I'm like, ooh, bro, I got bad news for you.
Yeah.
And also for Mina. After like this transition is happening, they're like, oh my god, we don't know what's going on with Mina. Like, we know that she's been bitten, she seems weird, but like we're not sure. Jonathan's like, yeah, well, if it turns out that she's got to be a vampire, sign me up, bro.
Yeah, but then also, like, when Dracula breaks in, he also destroys the records of what they've had. And then also, like, when they come in, they see him, Dracula... So we find out that Dracula's fed on her 3 times. And he also forces Mina to drink from him.
And drink from his, like... chest.
Yeah.
And that's what really cements her changing as a vampire. Because one of the things that they reveal in like a vampire lore dump that we skimmed over because it was too fucking long.
Yeah.
Is like the way that vampires work in Bram Stoker's world is the people that vampires feed on become vampires after they die.
Yeah.
And the actual transition into a vampire is requiring this transfusion.
Yeah. The old world version of the transfusion.
Exactly, the forceful one.
Yeah.
And it's pretty heavy, honestly.
Yeah.
You got Jonathan and Mina both having like this PTSD from like these sexually charged attacks.
Yeah. They decide they still are like going forward with their plan about going to Dracula's other house in London by Piccadilly to like destroy the boxes. But they're like trying to figure out ways to make sure that they're like how they've been destroying quote the boxes, that they've been putting like wafers, like communion wafers in the boxes, and that's enough to destroy it. And so they put a wafer on Mina's head and it burns in her forehead, which I'm like, put it on her hand, why on her forehead? I mean, maybe that's like I guess crossing yourself. Okay. It's religious. I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Catholics.
And then poor Mina like bursts into tears again. She's like, I'm unholy. And it's like, and Jonathan's like, no, you're perfect. And I'm like, damn, bro.
Yeah.
Y'all need to chill a little.
And so they sneak into Dracula's house. They find the other boxes, but one box is missing. And they're like, shit, he's on the move.
Dracula's there at the house, and Jonathan goes from PTSD at the mere sight of the man to being willing to cut a bitch.
Yep.
Because he hurt his wife, and I'm like, damn, bro.
And he gets repelled by the crucifix and runs out the window.
Mm-hmm.
As they like make up their plan of how they're going to the next step for that last box, Van Helsing's like, what if I hypnotize her so she doesn't do vampire shit at night?
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Well, but also the hypnosis allows her to kind of tell them
exactly.
where she is.
They figure that out through the hypnosis.
And then she also has this interesting bit where she's like, you guys should be more merciful to him. And at first I was like, that's a weird fucking thing to say. And then like seconds later, it's because she's terrified that she's becoming a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
And she's worried like that they're going to treat her with the same ferocity that they treat Dracula. And I'm like...
Yeah, of course they are. If you go around assaulting people, you're gonna get shit on.
Yeah.
Get over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, yes, you didn't have consent, and that is awful. But if you become a vampire, you're going to do that because you get taken over with this infliction. So with Mina taking Dracula's blood, they figure out that through hypnosis, she is able to get like see through Dracula's eyes. For the most part, it's a little bit hazy depending on the situation, but they are able to figure out a plan this way. And they see, and she like talks about how she sees like was it like water and like boxes,
waves, there's rocking, and they figure out that he's on the move in the water. The other interesting thing that happens is because of this hypnosis link, like Van Helsing's like, hey guys, I know that this really backfired on us last time, but I think we might have to keep Mina out of plans because she can like tell Dracula about us.
Yeah, so like they think it's reciprocal that he can see through her.
And then like they like before they even have to say it, Mina's like, hey, he can probably see through my brain, so I'm gonna like not be involved in these planning meetings. Yeah. And I'm like, Mina's smarter than all of you.
And also with taking his blood, Mina can be called to his side whenever he wants.
Yeah, which is the flimsy justification for why they bring Mina with them.
Yeah.
Because Jonathan's like, you want me to bring my wife to that horror castle? And Van Helsing's like, yeah. Mina makes Jonathan promise that he's going to kill her if she goes too far. And he's like, but what if I don't? And she's like, please? He's like, maybe.
And then they journey to like the chase scene, which lasts way too long.
It lasts way too long.
It's cool, but it lasts way too long. It needs to be edited down.
The really interesting piece that happens, and the only interesting piece that happens, because this is also the point where I was speed reading and I didn't bother rereading it because I was like, I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of shipping documents, and you're like, cool.
There's a lot of shipping documents. There's a lot of like, they're hypnosing her and nothing's happening. But Dracula has figured out that they're using that link and cuts her off, A, and B, manipulates it so that it still looks like he's on the ship.
They are on their way. They're like, okay, he's going back to the country, to Transylvania. And then Van Helsing goes on this whole like rant being like, he thinks that he is so smart because he is so old and has all this battle tactics. But if you look at his actual battle tactics, whenever he was down, he went back and retreated to regroup. So right now, that's what he's doing. He's scared. He's regrouping. Like he like hypes them up. And so they make up this big plan and they end up splitting up in two parties. They have one party who is on the boat following the same like river thing that they think that he's on. And then they have Van Helsing and Mina who go to the castle to kind of cleanse out the castle.
Yeah, and that's where they run into like the brides again. And the brides try to call Mina over to them to join us, sister.
Van Helsing makes like a circle that protects them from the vampires, but also protects Mina from like doing shitty stuff. And throughout this journey, Mina's like, I'm not hungry, and all this stuff, and Van Helsing's like seeing her like still looking youthful and restful, and he's like, she's becoming a vampire. Like we see the slow process, but they are able to go to the castle. They're able to cleanse the boxes of dirt, the coffins there, and seal off the castle from Dracula.
Yeah. Don't they kill the wives too?
But like with the like wafers, and they kill them. Like this, they stab them and stuff. Van Helsing does specifically.
Yeah, because Mina can't dirty her hands with that kind of work.
No, well, she's also stuck in a circle, so she doesn't go and do evil things. Yeah, she's trapped. Double trapped. They're following Harker's journal backwards this time, going back towards the way, because they know that Dracula's going to come the same way that Harker came.
Yeah.
And also when they're on this whole journey to the castle, Mina's like, this area, like as it's getting creepier and creepier, like it was in Harker's journal, she's like, it's beautiful. I love the vibe. And it's like, girl, you're a vampire now.
And it's also like, there's also this element of like, oh yeah, like it was in Jonathan's journal. And Van Helsing's like, no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
The fuck?
Yeah. In the end, the actual destruction, the last like bit of how they defeat Dracula is like so fast. So Van Helsing and Mina go back down and they see it from afar and they end up catching up eventually. But the men, the three husbands,
and Jonathan
have like surrounded the cart and start attacking, and they are able to push the like coffin off the side. It's almost dusk, so like Dracula is still kind of powerless now, but he's starting to become like starting to wake up, like times of the essence.
Yeah.
And they're able to stab Dracula.
Yep.
But in the process, Quincy Morris dies.
Yep.
But it's like very minimal described. It's like it happens.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
We spent like 40 pages on putting together this logic puzzle, and the actual fight is like a paragraph and a half.
Whereas like the whole like way that they destroy Lucy is so descriptive. And I'm like,
this it reads as if, oh shit, I'm on a deadline, and I didn't spend, and I like meandered about this too much.
Yep.
Like literally on 399. That's one of the last notes I actually took, because again, for those of you not in the know, I read the last quarter of this book in an hour and a half before we were supposed to record. So maybe some details got skipped.
It's fine.
But there's like this huge ass logic puzzle that Mina and like Van Helsing like team up on, of putting together like all of these pieces. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, we are 21 pages from the end. Why are we still solving puzzles?
They defeat Dracula, and then it jumps to 7 years in the future. Mina and Harker. Mina also now is no longer
she
in danger of a vampire.
Like the mark disappears from her forehead.
Yeah, so
and
she's
fine.
cured because
like, and she also, I think part of the reason why the transformation never like finishes is because she doesn't drink the human blood.
Yeah,
she like manages.
Yeah.
To keep her shit together.
Yeah.
/ the men help her keep her shit together.
Yeah, she gets trapped in that circle. Mina and Harker have a child that they name Morris.
Yeah.
They call him Quincy, which I think is sweet. They visit, after 7 years, they visit all the notes, which is what the book that we just read, all the found footage. But they're kind of like sad that there's like no actual proof of this. There's just
what they wrote, and everyone's going to write it off as them being nuts.
Yep. And that's how it ends.
Yep.
And then the few various Gothic novels I've read, the endings are either tragic or a little bit let you down a bit, but it makes sense, right? Because the whole book, you're like, oh, it's spooky on the edge of my seat. Like, either it's going to end tragically and drastically, or it's just going to be like, and they lived happily ever after.
Yep.
You know?
And it's kind of like the ending of this book, like, it drags so much because, again, Bram needed another edit, baby.
Yep.
And you get the feeling that he just didn't want to write. He built Dracula up so much as like this big entity that was going to be hard to fight, that when it came down to like the final battle, he was like, I got to make it quick, because otherwise people are going to be like, well, why didn't he just do this thing that he did earlier?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I kind of like I remember the first time I read it, kind of liking the like time bit where they were like, we need to do this quickly before dusk happens. But on subsequent rereads, it's like, disappointing.
Yeah. Do you want to know some fun facts?
Sure.
So, Stoker never visited Eastern Europe. That was mentioned.
Shocking.
I know, so shocking.
His descriptions were so good.
Guess how long it took him to write this book?
4 years.
7 years. 7 years, which it's not bad, but like it could have been some edits in those 7 years. You know?
That kind of makes sense, because it feels like
it wasn't his full-time job.
A, it's not his full-time job, and B, there are parts where like, you know, I write for fun.
Yeah.
And I write very slowly.
Yeah.
And there are parts where I like go back and like look at it and I'm like, ooh, those things don't connect.
Yeah.
And it feels like the connective tissue that he put together is like these research things instead of like vampire stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Stoker managed a famous actor, and that actor was rumored to have inspired the personality of Dracula. Take that for what, you know.
Honestly, that tracks.
Yeah. There's also a theatrical version of Dracula that came out before the novel came out. So originally it was for the stage, and then he changed it. The working title was The Dead Undead and then The Undead, and at last minute got changed to Dracula. I already mentioned that he was a fanboy of Walt Whitman and rumored to have been romantically involved.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Stoker began writing this a month after Oscar Wilde's imprisonment. The whole theme of sexual repression throughout this book, and you can see that mimicking in his own life.
The queerness.
Yes.
The inherent queerness of Dracula.
Yes. I enjoyed rereading this, but I thoroughly think that's large part of it was from the theatrical audiobook that I listened to, who really helped. I also was reading it on a weekend. Isaac was out of town, and so I was at home alone, and it was spooky and dark and rainy, so like it was a nice like spooky read. I do think a lot of it is boring, but like when it's interesting, it's good, and like and also like ticks the part of my English major brain that's like, ooh, symbolism, oh, this is mirroring here, like it gets that, like it itches that part of my brain. But I don't love the book, but I enjoyed the process of it, if that makes sense.
I get that. I mean, I think I want to reiterate what you said, where the parts that are good are really good. There's a lot of boring stuff, and I think like I like Dracula a lot as a book. This is the first time I've reread it in a little while, and as you can tell, the things I care most about are Mina and Jonathan, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, I like the atmospheric stuff. I got more of this time, and like all of that, but there's just a little too much like bullshit.
Yes.
You know,
and I think it's also misguiding. The book is called Dracula. And the cool parts of Dracula are the first, 100 pages. And then there's little Dracula in it. Like, it's shocking how little vampire is in this book.
Yeah. So, like, the way that it goes for me is I feel like up until they fight Lucy, I'm into it.
Yeah.
And then after Lucy dies, and they're doing all this research and stuff, the, like, next 3 quarters
to 200 pages.
And the next quarter is really like dragging. Then Mina gets attacked. And then it gets cool interesting for like 20 pages, and then it drags.
I agree.
And then the ending happens, and you're like, okay.
Okay. I agree.
It's kind of ironic though, because like people like, you talked about earlier how that tonal shift of like gothic horror to oh no, the horror of 3 men proposing to me. Yeah. Is like such a like big shift, and that's actually apparently where a lot of people get lose it, and I get it, but it's also like, to me, that kind of adds to the horror, because it's like, here's this horrific shit happening that nobody knows about, and they're all just worried about their own lives. Yeah, and plus Lucy's about to die, so yeah. I think for being a more modern gothic novel, because it came after the big gothic novel boom, I think it is interesting how he plays on the genre, and I think if you're into that kind of stuff, I think it's for sure worth reading. I think if you're not into this kind of writing or gothic stuff, or like the like meta literature of it all, I think it's okay if you want to read the Spark Notes. I think it's okay if you want to read the Spark Notes. I think it's okay if you do the Dracula Daily and just skip all the Jon Stewart entries. It'll be fine. Yeah. Or like listen to like the podcast or like the audiobook version, because this is in the public domain, so like you're not even breaking any laws. Yeah. Question: what Dracula movies have you seen? None. Well, then how come you talked about how you didn't like... Because I've looked up all of them. You know how I work. Okay, so the Wikipedias weren't gave enough for you. No, the Wikipedias are sitting there, and I'm like, I looked at every adaptation of Dracula to try to figure out, like, hey, how come I don't have any good Mina content? And it's because... Yeah. But, like, as a child, I'm, like, sitting there being like... a child, teenager. Yeah. Being there like, okay, so this version makes her a love interest. This version makes her in Dracula love interest. This version makes her in Dracula like a love interest. It's all Mina Dracula shit. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, they interact for one goddamn scene. Maybe don't. Yeah. So I've never actually seen Dracula movies. I haven't either. Yeah, so we're going to challenge ourselves to watch 4 Dracula adaptations in the next week. We're watching Nosferatu, the OG,
We're watching the Christopher Lee one from the 50s. We're watching the
Francis Ford Coppola.
Keanu Reeves one from 90 whatever, 93 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then the Renfield one with Nick Cage that came out last year.
Yep.
There's so many adaptations that we really had to like narrow it down.
More gay adaptations of Dracula.
I mean, more gay adaptations of most things. But yes, I agree.
Specifically, there's like real gay subtext in this.
Yes.
Play it up.
Yep. I bet it exists out there. We just haven't.
Give me my homoerotic Jonathan and Dracula, like enemies to lovers 42K without the killing the babies.
It has to already exist on AO3. You know this, right?
I know, but like AO3 means that I might have to read stuff that people wrote. That's bad.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed us rambling about vampires and British shit. Again, next week we're watching 4 movies that I've mentioned earlier. Also, they're on my Instagram. Go follow my Instagram at Read the Book First Podcast. All the updates are on there. And I'm also like trying to like do like fun little reels and other things that people might like. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure you're following us on Instagram. Subscribe to our shows on whatever podcast platform so it automatically downloads. Share it with your friends. Rate us 5 stars. If it's not 5 stars, you don't have to worry about it. Thanks for listening. And remember, read the book first.